Okay, thank you very much. First off, I'd be remiss if I didn't say Shana Tova. Let's try that again. Shana Tova. And happy second day of our new year. I've always found it interesting that if the secular new year is all about making personal, often performative resolutions, like working out more, staying on social media less, the Jewish New Year is an attempt at cheshbon hanefesh, spiritual accountability, and how to try and fix what is internal. Forgive and be forgiven in turn. Be a better Jew, a better person. Even in truth, sometimes our Rosh Hashanah vows last no longer than our New Year's resolutions. One thing I've always strived for is the mantra, everything in moderation. That is, I attempt to be moderate in my views, my beliefs, my politics, and most of all, my reactions to things and people. And when I find myself getting riled up, I always try to center myself, to de-escalate the situation. Seldom does anything good happen after losing control. And if you control yourself, you moderate yourself by working at moderation in your life and not trying to live too much in the extremes, you may find yourself a more balanced person, more reasonable, responsive, and less reactive. There's no question that the world around us seems terrifying at present. There's war, terrorism, school shootings, assassinations, and, of course, unfortunately, anti-Semitism. Moderation, sensibility, practicality, centrality, and even compassion all seem to have fallen by the wayside. The extreme right and extreme left are united in one thing. They both hate Israel. Whether it's outright overt Jew hatred or anti-Israel, anti-Zionism to disguise their anti-Semitism, they have no love for Jews or, by extension, the Jewish state. It has become a horseshoe of hatred with the most irrational and antagonistic viewpoints on either end, or better yet, visualize a snake eating itself, because that is how self-destructive it has become to our overall society. It seems we can't even have simple dialogue with one another, as civil discourse has become uncivil discord. As Jews, our primary concern is how best to talk about and defend Israel, but for others, the points of contention could extend to so many political and personal issues. Sometimes within our own families, it feels as if we might as well be living on different planets, and the chasm between us cannot be breached. I sometimes therefore think if everyone was much more moderate in their approach to most things in life, be it personal or political beliefs, their work or behavior, we could understand each other that much more, or at least find it easier to dialogue and relate to one another. Now, that does not mean you cannot have things you feel passionate about. Chas v'shalom, heaven forbid. Even Oscar Wilde quipped, everything in moderation, including moderation. Just don't let your views and beliefs shut you off to everything and everyone else around you. The noted documentarian Ken Burns stated that the Greek etymology for the word enthusiasm translates to God is with us. In a sense, that is what having a vocation is all about. It is your calling from God. But it should never be so all-consuming that it burns others and engulfs ourselves. The word passion comes from the Latin root passio, to be tortured by something. That is why we have to set limits within ourselves, attempt limits in our way of thinking and even feeling. Living life in any extreme is not sustainable for too long. The Torah reading for this morning is known in liturgical parlance as the Akedah, or the binding of Isaac, Abraham's only son through his wife Sarah, and the second patriarch in our tradition. Now, most of us are taught that the reason for God putting Abraham to a test like this is to impart upon him the understanding that our religion is not one that condones the sacrifice of children or the sacrifice of human beings in general. Judaism is not a religion in which that should ever happen, and our God would never ask that of us. Only fundamentalists and fanatics, terrorists, extremists, would sacrifice a person or their own children. When you consider it, it's the most illogical and sacrilegious thing to ask a parent to sacrifice their child. But yet that is what terrorists do. There's a midrash that Abraham was so intent on slaying Isaac that the angels in heaven started to cry in desperation. Those tears fell into Isaac's eyes as he lay prone on the altar, blurring his vision and causing blindness years later, such to the point that Isaac couldn't recognize the difference between his own sons Jacob and Esau when he got older, even though they were physically distinct. And Abraham was so blinded by religious fervor at that moment to serve God that he couldn't see the person he was about to kill was his own flesh and blood, and not the ram caught in the thicket that he should have sacrificed in Isaac's place. Hatred doesn't just blind us to our true connection to God, it also blinds us to our connection to one another. I have a colleague whose father is also a rabbi, who told me as a kid, he asked, "Dad, is there anything you're fanatical about?" And his father, after a momentary pause, replied, "Yes, I'm fanatically opposed to fanaticism." We should all strive for that attitude. The world might actually be a better place. Now, our enemies, they're out there in the world, those that hate the West and the values that we employ. Even in some cases, we find it in this country, both in the radical left, progressive circles, and the alt-right that inhabit extremist hate groups or online chat forums. Neither are taught moderation, meaning holding the middle ground and trying to see different viewpoints on either end of the spectrum, but not letting yourself get pulled so far one way or the other that you lose sight or empathy for another's beliefs. What's unfortunately happening in our society, in our country today, is that both the left and the right are pulling so intensely on either end that we've reached an inflection point, and I believe the center cannot hold for long. Often we feel either forced to pick a side, or we find that if we try to stake out a place in the middle, we feel very much alone, as if our views are illegitimate, not strong enough, or maybe too strong in some respects. We used to be able to discuss in a civil way, whether in the halls of Congress or around the family dinner table, maybe even with a neighbor while you trim your front lawn, or a coworker around the company water cooler. Now those bygone days seem like a romanticized, almost naive past, as instead we have echo chambers, exacerbated by what we see and read on social media in short-form content. After all, it's far too easy to be mean behind a screen. And yes, freedom of speech is an established American value, but there are real-world consequences to what people say, what they espouse, what is heard, and who gets hurt in the process. Having a screen often gives us all the more incentive or the temptation to go off on a screed. Information can be more readily available and shared in our social media society, but so can misinformation, so can mistrust, and misconceptions and suspicions. It seems that one of the problems in our society today is that a binary notion of how to view the world is what's taught and encouraged. There is an absence of moral clarity and critical thinking. Conspiracy theories, censorship, and cancel culture are far too prevalent, as is the whole notion of oppressor versus oppressed, and how that is the only lens with which to view history and society, with the Jews getting squeezed out in the process. We can't be expected to solve the problems that plague our society at the present. The list is far too numerous. And even if we were able to improve some situations, others would persist or new ones would suddenly erupt. We live in an imperfect world as we are imperfect beings. This is not heaven after all. Some mystics posit that it's a sign of what's called Chevlei HaMashiach, or the birth pangs of the Messiah. The idea being that life gets increasingly more chaotic before the Messianic era arrives. Now, I can't guarantee you that's what's happening. After all, we've been through difficult times before. But I can tell you, our record as a people for surviving every crisis is 100%. Last week at the JCC, I was invited to sound shofar with a few other clergy, and one of them had his yellow hostage pin upside down. Yeah, okay, let me fix mine as I say that. So I pointed it out on his lapel, and then another colleague noticed my hostage pin was also accidentally turned upside down, to which she couldn't but help but remark, you have to fix yourself before you try to fix someone else. And that is the lesson for this period we are in. It's not just noticing and pointing out the faults in others. I mean, that's easy to do. We have to also notice our own flaws and be open to correcting them, even when someone else points them out for us. As Jews, in this life, the best we could sometimes hope for is to enact some small tikkun, a small improvement in our lives and maybe the lives of some others in the process, and perhaps even as a collective, be an or lagoyim, a light onto the nations, as the prophet Isaiah predicted. And that is part of the reasoning for having the Yamim Noraim, these days of awe, every year as opposed to once in a lifetime. It gives us not only a chance to recalibrate our own humanity by asking for tshuva, for forgiveness, and maybe extending it to someone else, but instills in us the lessons of empathy, kindness, and compassion. The great Jewish Egyptian sage Philo of Alexandria wrote nearly 2,000 years ago, "Be kind, because everyone you meet in life is fighting a great battle." I'm not saying all the issues in our world could be solved if everyone were simply nicer to one another, but maybe it would be a start. And maybe the key is not just sympathy, but empathy for our fellow person, trying to at least momentarily view the world through their eyes for a bit. We might find it an eye-opening experience. The poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote, "If we could read the secret history of our enemies, we should find in each man's life sorrow and suffering enough to disarm hostility." Admittedly, it's hard to do that all the time, but the high holy days remind us that now is the time. In our Mishnah, it states that a controversy for heaven's sake has lasting value. It's called the machloket l'shem shamayim, like a respectful disagreement between the rabbinic sages. Whereas all those controversies that are not for heaven's sake will not endure. That is petty, baseless, and disrespectful arguments. When you get upset at a person or situation, try and take a mental beat first. Is this truly worth it? Will it further anything or anyone? Sometimes you simply have to pick your battles. If you're honestly able to tell yourself that in 5 months' time from now this problem won't really matter, then it's likely not worth more than 5 minutes of your time. Being the bigger person isn't always about letting the other person off the hook, although I know at times it can seem that way. Sometimes it lets us off the hook, free to meditate and give our attention elsewhere, to those who want it, those who need it and deserve it. It can also help restore to us a sense of much-needed normalcy, something we all could use more of in these trying times. The astrological sign for this period we are now in is Libra, the scales. Maybe it's no coincidence. We want to be judged favorably, and maybe part of that means keeping our spirits in balance, not tipping too far one way or the other. As the Hebrew calendar turns on this new year and we confront our fate, may be a great year, a year in which we have health and happiness, both physically, spiritually, and mentally, a year in which we can forgive as much as we can be forgiven, a year of tranquility, a year of passion and intensity for what matters when it matters, but may it be also balanced by proper reflection and introspection whenever possible. A year of moderation in what we do and how we react to all things and all people. Forgiving others can sometimes mean forgiving yourself. Let OWHC be a safe haven for all the chaos that sometimes seems to reign in this world. A middle ground where we can all meet and take a beat. Politics doesn't need to intrude on our lives, nor social media to wash out our spirituality. Everyone is welcome here. And may we all be written and inscribed in that great big book of life together for 5786 and hopefully many more years to come. God bless us, God bless Israel, and please let our remaining hostages be freed as soon as possible. Shana Tova u'Mituka. Thank you. Thank you. Meant every word of it. I'd like to ask everyone to please rise and please clear the center aisle. The cantor is now going to pray on our behalf the Hineni prayer just before we begin Musaf. We only have about an hour left of the service, so please, if you can clear the center aisles as the cantor is going to make his way down.
Kenny, close to the microphone, okay?
Page 140, Hineni.
Okay. Close to the microphone. Put it up, put it up. Yes, good. Okay. I'm going there, I'm stopped.